The hall smelled of roast boar and spiced wine and sweet cream gone sour with fear. Music had dissolved into a thin scraping of strings, and a drum thudding unevenly as if the drummer's heart had stumbled. The boy king sprawled across the table as if he'd fallen asleep atop his own wedding feast, purple shadowing his lips, his lashless eyes staring. Cups lay on their sides like tumbled crowns. Fingers reached and recoiled. Whisper ran like smoke from mouth to mouth. Jaime's golden hand caught lamplight as he touched it to his breast more for habit than prayer. The weight of it made him feel tethered to the earth. When he rose, it rasped against the table's edge. Men parted for white, not for him. The white cloak did its work even when the man inside it did not deserve it. He moved through the way that opened between casks and hams, around servants on their knees scooping up pearls that had come loose from someone's sleeve, past a dog that licked at spilled gravy and then, confused, raised its muzzle and whined. Cersei's voice threw itself against the stone of the hall. "Seize him! Seize that vile dwarf! He did this! He did this!" Her finger, gold and narrow and now jerking at every knuckle, pointed at Tyrion as if she alone could nail him to the floorboards. And the girl, where is the girl? His little wolf, where is she? Tyrion looked very small in a storm of gazes and drawn breaths. He stood where he'd been pushed, wine across his doublet like a wound. He did not run. He held the cup that had been in Joffrey's hand and regarded it as if it were an old puzzle. His mouth tilted in a way that meant either bravery or disaster. Two Kettleblacks went for him with steel in their hands and enjoyment in their eyes. "Hold!" Jaime's voice went hard as a helm rim. "The king's peace stands." He lifted his golden hand and felt the new weight of command. "Ser Merin, Ser Boros." Swords remain sheathed until the Lord Commander speaks. Meryn Trant hesitated. His sword hovered like a thought he could not quite finish. Boros Blunt looked thankful for any instruction that did not require thinking at all. Only Osmond Kettleblack smiled as if he had not heard. Balon Swan moved to Jaime's side, quiet and sure, white cloak settling like snow. Loras Tyrell came as well, pale with something that could have been grief or rage. He wore his cloak as one wears a title that still fits loosely at the shoulders. Jaime struck the table with his golden hand. It rang. The hall's hum startled and then subsided. Cersei's face was a cut flower, still beautiful, petals dropping one by one. "He killed our son," she said to Jaime as if the words were a knife he must take into himself. "Take his head. Take it now." "I will not have murder answer murder," Jaime said. He looked at Tyrion, then at the shattered king sprawled across the table's gold cloth as if he mocked the idea of gold. "No one dies in this hall tonight without trial." Cersei laughed. "Too high. Trial? My boy is dead. He is purple and cold and you talk of trial." She turned to the Kettleblacks. "Cut the imp down." Osmond's sword inched further from the scabbard, smiling all the while at his queen. He was a dog that had always learned that the lady would smuggle it biscuits under the table no matter what the Lord said. Jaime looked at him until the smile faltered. "Disobey me," Jaime said, "and I'll have your head on the steps of the Great September before the bells finish tolling for the king." Osmond licked his lips. "Begging your pardon, my lord." "None given," Jaime said and turned. "Lord Varys." The spymaster drifted closer with his hands folded like a pious grandmother. "My lord, seal the gates of the city. No ships leave Blackwater Bay." Jaime's gaze cut across the hall. "Ser Loras, you'll take 4 brothers and secure the crown Prince Tommen. I want him in Maegor's holdfast within the hour with a ring of white so thick the wind must ask to pass. Ser Balon, you'll see to the queen." Cersei blinked. "What is this?" Color leapt into her face that was not the color of grief. "I am to be with my son. Do you hear me, Jaime? I am to be with my son. You will see Tommen when he is safe," Jaime said. "For now you are to your chambers. Under guard." "Under?" She stepped toward him, toward his impossible bright hand, and the world narrowed to her eyes. He could not remember them ever looking small before. "You dare." "Ido." The words were ash and iron. "For the king's peace." He nodded at Balan Swan. "Escort her, gently, and keep the Kettleblacks out of Maegor's." The hall strained at the seams. Lady Olenna sat very straight at her table, a neat white bone of a woman, the tilt of her head sharp enough to slice fruit. Mace Tyrell was all wounded drapery. The Red Viper watched with a longing that looked like interest. Perhaps he longed for anything that smelled of blood. Tywin Lannister moved like a shadow in bright rooms. Jaime had not seen him enter, but he was there, pale flecks of torment near his mouth made of nothing but calculation. "You will undo this," Cersei said to their father. "Tell him to undo this." Tywin looked from daughter to son as if he were measuring bricks. "The hall is not a place for grief," he said. "Not like this." He faced Jaime. "You did right to secure the boy. The Hand will convene the council at first light. The Queen will retire." Cersei's breath came swift. "Father!" Tywin's gaze held the calm of a closed door. "Retire?" She stared at him, then at Jaime, and hatred like a blade slid from the scabbard of her silence. "Traitor!" she whispered, and let Balan and 2 guards in white escort her through the parting crowd. As she passed Tyrion, she lifted her hand half as if to strike, and then her fingers convulsed and fell. Her skirts swirled like smoke. The door to Maegor's swallowed her. The music died entirely. For a heartbeat, all the noise in the hall was the dog whining. Then a bell struck far away, and another, each note catching on the next like stones thrown across water. "Lord Varys," Tywin said, "the Queen's apartment is to be held by the Kingsguard only. No one enters without my leave." His gaze skimmed the hall. "Pycelle to the body. I want the truth in my hands by sunup. Ser Mandon." He caught himself. Mandon Moore had died by the Blackwater, and it was like Tywin to notice his absence and file it away then and there. He never left his own halls with missing bricks. "Ser Boros, you will see to order. No one leaves the hall until they are questioned. Varys, send for the captain of the City Watch. Where is he? Find him. If he's in a whorehouse, pull him from the lap he's in." The hall began to move as instructed, as if Tywin had pulled strings and the puppet straightened. Jaime found himself at the foot of the dais staring at Joffrey's face. The boy had always been beautiful as a blade you ornately crosshatched and hung on a wall to admire but never to use. Now he looked plebeian. There were bluish marks at his throat and the dry glitter of sugar on his lips where cake had smeared. A cluster of small purple crystals clung to a sticky patch on the table beside his ear. Pycelle wheezed as he bent with tweezers and a napkin. "Poison," he declared to the air. He sniffed. "The Strangler, mayhaps." The tweezers rattled. "An abomination of Lys. Poison," Littlefinger would have said like a purr, but Littlefinger was not here to purr. He was in the Vale sailing his way to a wedding bed as cold as a mountain lake. Varys's eyelids barely fell. "Terrible," he said softly, grief draped like a shawl. He looked at Tyrion, then away. Tyrion had not moved. He set the poisoned cup down as carefully as if it were a child. "You'll want that," he said to Pycelle, and it would have sounded brave if there hadn't been a hollow behind the words like the hole a tooth leaves. "Careful. Don't prick yourself. We'd never hear the end of you wheezing." Jaime nodded to 2 white cloaks. "Take him to a tower cell," he said. "No hands on him more than needed." He watched them take Tyrion, watched his brother's short stride between 2 walls of white that were men, watched the hall swallow him. For a moment, he pried his own eyes from his brother and tried to remember Joffrey as a baby clenching a finger. He failed. The memory would not do him that courtesy. The only thing that came to him was a smear of strawberry tart across a toddler's mouth and a laugh like a bark. It made his throat ache anyway. Outside the feast hall, the wind tasted of smoke and the river. The moon was a splinter. He crossed the courtyard with Balan Swan's quiet presence at his shoulder and climbed the inner steps to Maegor's holdfast, his golden hand catching and releasing the stone like something alive. The white sword door stood open. A boy in laced leather had spilled a jug of cider and crouched beside it swabbing as if frantic cleanliness would keep him from a beating. Jaime stepped around him. Cersei sat with her back very straight in the center of her chamber. The fire burned too hot. as if it were a rival for the sun. She did not look at him. Beyond her, in a bedchamber, a nurse sobbed with a hand to her mouth. Her sobs sounded like hiccups someone had told her she must not have. 2 guards at the door shifted uncertainly at his entrance. They had the look of men guarding a cave with a bear inside that they loved and feared. Jaime, Cersei said without his title, and the name from her mouth used to be a door he walked through. Tonight it was a blade. Tell me you aren't doing this. I'm doing this, he said. The boy must be safe. The city must be quiet. You will have him soon. She turned then, and her eyes were a law he had been breaking for half his life. He is my son, and my king, Jaime said, and worth more safe than dead. You think I would harm him? Her mouth twitched. For a moment grief broke armor. She was just a woman whose boy had died with cake in his throat. You would set guards on me. I would set the world around you so it cannot come for you with torches, Jaime said. Stay within these walls. Say nothing to the Kettleblacks. Speak with no one save a septa or a maester if you require. Say nothing. She breathed, short. This is how you comfort me. The brunt of her stare became his to carry. Who calls the banners now my son is? She swallowed. The regent is I. The council will decide, Jaime said. The council, she said with the weight of centuries of contempt and small boys overseeing big men. And father will decide the council. And where will you be? Wed to your vows like some pious imbecile with a knife. Where I swore to be, he said. At our king's side. The word "our" made something in her flinch. She turned away and put her hands out toward the fire. Around her the room was the green of a forest in guilt. The sound of the nurse's stifled weeping drifted through the door as if from very far away. When Cersei spoke again, her voice was thin and precise. You're a fool, she said. You always have been. You think vows make men. Vows are words that let others own you. And you think love gives you leave to do anything, Jaime said, and hated himself for the word he had chosen. Hated how its truth snared him as well. She laughed then, softly, as if she'd found a jewel in a midden heap. Said the man who has broken more oaths than most men have had cause to make. She looked at his hand. And still you wear gold on it as if it were a trophy. Is that meant to comfort me too? Nothing I can say will comfort you, he said. Sleep. If sleep will come, I will send a septa. No, her mouth made the shape of that word like she had been carving it all her life. Send me Tommen. When it is safe. When I say it is. When the council says it is, he said, and walked away because to stand there any longer would mean another kind of surrender. In the White Sword Tower, the white book lay open on the writing stand. Someone, Arthur Dane in his day or Gerald Hightower or some old ghost, had scrawled a margin note about the winds off Dragonstone making a page turn itself. The book had weight like law. Jaime turned pages with his left hand because the right could not feel them. His own page was a smear of failures cut short. Squire to Ares, Kingsguard Knight, Kingslayer, the burning of the Riverlands. He looked at the blank under those words and felt time breathe on his neck. He dipped the quill and wrote in a dry, careful hand, as if writing this made it true in the marrow of the world. On the wedding night of King Joffrey, seized the hall and preserved the king's peace. Removed the queen regent to custody that the realm be held from riots and rash justice. Secured Prince Tommen's person within Maegor's holdfast. Ink spattered slightly where the quill caught on the D and removed. That small foolish imperfection pleased him in some perverse way. He blew on the page and watched the black go to dull. Through the arrow-slit window the river moved like iron poured in a mold and left to cool. At dawn the council chamber was a cold box of stone with a long table like a ship's plank. Tywin sat at its head with the indifference of ownership. Pycelle had dragged himself in like a creaking cart and smelled of old onions and physic. Varys drifted like fog into a low chair. Mace Tyrell took up space. And behind him like the needle of a compass Lady Olenna watched everyone and everything and made notes in her head. The Dornish prince sat coiled, his mouth lazy enough to mock his eyes. The poison, Tywin said without flourish, was likely the strangler. It was smuggled into the feast in some mode we have yet to discover. The cup was contaminated at the dais. He let that lie like a trap. Tyrion Lannister is arrested on suspicion of regicide. The Stark girl is missing. Her flight speaks loudly of guilt. The City Watch is scouring the city. Ships are held in port. Whether the girl is guilty or terrified she would be accused, Varys said with soft sorrow. She will flee all the same. We block ships, but there are fishermen along 1,000 black inlets. Then we tighten the roads, Tywin said, and a man took a note. The Queen will remain in her apartments until such time as she is fit to attend and until the watch is seen to be disciplined. We will put a captain at the gate who is not in Cersei's pocket. His gaze slid to Jaime like a knife being set down. My son chose well to secure Maegor's. Tommen will be moved to the Tower of the Hand once I am assured of orders being obeyed. Maegor's walls are thick, Jaime said with a calm he had taught his face the last few hours. He is safe where he is. Safe is where I say he is, Tywin said without heat. It was simply the weather in the room. Oberyn, Mace Tyrell said, not quite managing to make the name casual. You sit here in our city speaking ill of the day's bread with your eyes, and yet you forget your hospitality. It was the Tyrells who provided the feast, not the Martells. Prince Oberyn looked at him as if Mace had turned into a pig at the table. I forget nothing, he said, least of all the hospitality of your Lord Father, Lord Tywin. Do you remember mine? On the green of the Prince's Pass? No? Time rubs rough places smooth, but not all. Enough, Tywin said as one might say enough to a buzzing gnat. The Queen's men are to stand down. The Kingsguard will hold Maegor's. The trial for Tyrion will commence when we have set the stones around it so they don't sink. Lord Mace, you will maintain food prices in the city so no one takes this as excuse to riot. Lord Varys, I expect you to find this hair the poisoner split and split it again until I know whose hand held the cup. Varys bowed. But of course. And the Queen, Olenna said in her brisk old woman's voice that could cut cheese like wire, will be allowed to see her remaining son. When she is calmer, Tywin said. The old lady clicked her tongue. She will not be calmer. Not that one. Bit between the teeth and a stumble in the yard for as long as she draws breath. Better to put her before candles and let some string-smelling old man tell her it is all God's will. It will tire her out. Jaime did not smile. Tywin did not either, though the corner of his mouth might have remembered how. After the council broke, before breakfast and the sharp water that woke a man's tongue, Jaime found Lancel in a small solar where squires went to pretend they were men and men went to pretend they still had squires' problems. Lancel's face was the pallor of bad milk. He smelled faintly of stale wine and nerves. He had cuts across his knuckles that you got from hitting a beam in frustration. He had a prayer cord around his wrist that looked new. You were at the feast, Jaime said as if it were a question. Lancel nodded too many times. His Adam's apple rose and fell like a frightened thing in a cage. You poured wine for the king. For all the lords, Lancel said, quick. As I was bid. The cupbearers are... It rotates. I didn't. Look at me, Jaime said. Lancel looked, and the eyes that had admired him when he was beautiful now could hardly hold his gaze. If you saw anything, if you know anything, now is the time. Not at prayer. Here. Lancel's mouth opened and closed twice. He lifted his hands, looked at them as if expecting proof. Then his face went and then it came back a different thing. He drew breath and the words dropped from his lips like stones. I sinned, he said. It was not what Jaime had asked, and it covered too many possibilities. The boy's lip quivered. With the Queen, the quiet swallowed them whole. I served her in wine. For Robert, she told me to give him strong wine and I did. And her bed also, and may gods judge me. May they judge me. I thought, she is Cersei and I was... You can't imagine what it is to be noticed by her. You can. Gods help me, you can. She said she loved me. She said it and called me Jaime when she spent, and I... Jaime's world tipped resentfully and then righted itself. The room smelled of rushes and shame. Somewhere below in the yard a boy laughed wildly. Jaime felt something thin and taut unspool in his chest. Very quietly, like thread grabbed by invisible fingers. He had wanted the truth, and the truth was a snake that bit and then ached. "Did she bid you poison this cup?" he asked. His voice did not belong to him. It was a friend speaking for him because he could not. "No," Lancel said, and the relief that flashed in his face was real. It made him more guilty by contrast. "By the Seven, no. She has done many things, but not this. She wouldn't." He swallowed, eyes wet. "She hates your brother so well she can't see him without reaching for a knife. But she would not murder her own son to ruin him. This was not her." Jaime stared at his cousin. No, his confessor, until the room steadied. He put one hand to his shifted sword belt as if it would take weight from his mind. "You will go to the High Septon," he said finally, and Lancel flinched as if he had been struck. "And tell him this, in full, not a word less. You will cut yourself away from her with truth as if with a blade." Lancel's breath tore in and out. "You would have me," his voice died. "As you wish, my lord. And you will say nothing to anyone else," Jaime said. "Not even your own reflection." He put a hand on Lancel's shoulder because he did not know whether he meant to comfort or control. "If I learn you whisper to anyone, I send you to the dungeons for treason, and I do not send a septa to weep for you." "I hear," Lancel whispered. "I hear. And if you are lying," Jaime added, and felt the hardness of his own voice like a tooth he had not known he had. "I will know it. Do not lie to me again." He left Lancel shaking as if bathing in cold. When he closed his eyes to rest, he saw Tyrion's cup, the glimmer of purple dust. When he opened them, the trial had begun. They did not call it a trial at first. They called it an inquiry, and then hearings, and then it became trial as if the word had arrived of its own accord and found its chair. The hall smelled of too many bodies and oiled leather and parchment baked by sunlight. The 7 judges sat behind their collars and rings and gold. Tywin at the center did not fidget and did not blink. Across the space that had the weight of ocean between them, Tyrion stood and wore his failure to be cowed very prettily. Witnesses lied as if they had rehearsed lies in a small room until the lies had forgotten what truth sounded like. Ser Meryn spoke of tyranny from a small man, Ser Boros of whispered threats, Pycelle of missing herbs and old fears. A singer of a jest told once on a summer terrace that was now an omen. Varys floated his net of whispers until it encircled the small man perfectly. "You once said," he murmured, "that you would make your nephew choke on his own arrogance. Forgive my poor memory. I may misstate the exact words." He did not misstate them. Jaime watched the Dornish prince's hands move idly atop the wood. Oberyn smiled when men lied. He only ceased when a woman had to be ushered out sobbing and Tyrion's mouth went soft at the edges for a heartbeat before hardening again like worked leather. Sansa was not found. A boat no one saw had gone out of a black cove no one watched with a knight who had an old claim on pity and none on honor. And that boat grew a shadow and a sail and was gone into the bright. At night the city was quieter than it had any right to be. Perhaps Tywin's hard order had ironed it flat. Perhaps fear had made it careful. Jaime slept badly in half-hour slices. He dreamed that the White Book had his name written in blood that would not dry. On the morning that memory would be carved into stone, they brought a red viper to court. Oberyn rose with the insolent grace of a cat and declared he would speak. He smiled at the judges, at Tywin, at the poor prince who would be king if he survived the next week. He smiled most at Tyrion. "Ser Gregor," he said when the mountain's name came up as it always did like rot in the foundation. "Killed my sister and her children by your command, my lord." He let the sentence hang where the words "by your command" dripped in everyone's ears. "I will prove it with iron." He tapped that irony lightly. "If the crown employs a monster, let the monster come and see if he can finish a task he left undone." Tywin's mouth was a clear sky. "The law permits a trial by combat," he said, "and the crown accepts." Men cheered because they did not know anyone better. Men whispered because they did. The mountain came into the yard under guard like a bad dream had been taught to walk. He looked scarcely human near other men. Too large, as if some other artist had been called to sketch him on later. His respirations sounded like a bellows, his eyes like holes. The viper shed his cloak as if he were entering a warm sea, smiling faintly as he stretched. Loras Tyrell stood with his mouth a thin line. His hands twitched not toward sword or prayer but toward both. When the viper danced, the world forgot to breathe. He moved with the laziness of a snake warming itself on a rock, then struck with the instant amidship speed of a dagger thrown from a second-story window. He bled the giant. You could see it, red lines on the gray cloth, red coming through like impatience. The mountain moved as if earth had taught him where to put his feet. He took blows, and he gave them, and the yard rang like smithy. Steel sang in a key you could throw yourself against until you bled. The viper spoke as he moved, words falling like bright coins. He said names, he said places, he said the names of children who had died in their beds. He laughed and his teeth flashed. Jaime watched, and for a moment he believed that a man's anger made him immortal. Then the Viper slipped, or perhaps he did not slip, and something in him believed the universe owed him the spectacle of an admission. He leaned too close to the mouth of a cave. He wanted to hear a sorry from the cave itself. The mountain's huge hand found him, and then his other hand, and then it was over, and a cheer rose that sounded like an animal screaming. The crown had its verdict. The crowd had its lesson. Don't ask monsters to say they're sorry. Tyrion had his death. The bells tolled again and again in a city that might have forgotten which name they were tolling for. Jaime walked to the Tower of the Hand on legs that did not feel like his. He meant to go to Tywin and ask for, he did not know. Mercy? A stay? A stratagem? He found his father with a quill, of course with a quill, apportioning wheat, telling the future what it must be. Send him to the wall, Jaime said without greeting. It was the old argument, the sensible compromise. He will be of use there, you know it. If you leave the Kingsguard, Tywin said calmly, still writing, eyes on neat figures, I will send him to the wall. The rock has need of a lord. Jaime felt the old leash slide up his throat. He could almost taste the leather. No, he said, and the no was a blade he had honed in silence. I swore a vow. I will not break every oath I have left to satisfy your ledgers. Tywin dipped the quill, tapped it against the pot, did not look up. Then he dies. It is very simple. It is simple because you have made it so, Jaime said, and his voice was a strange calm. He did not poison Joffrey. And do you know who did? Tywin asked, eyes flicking up for a moment like a serpent tasting air. Perhaps the Tyrells would enjoy hearing they are suspected in the murder of a king their daughter bedded for an hour. He did not wait for an answer. We do not accuse allies lightly, nor do we kill our sons lightly, Jaime said. One way or another, you always arrange to be rid of the ones who do not bend. Don't be a child, Tywin said, and for a moment Jaime thought he might be 7 again. Dripping river water, mud on his knee, Cersei pulling him by the hand toward something wicked and wonderful, and father saying don't. I made this family. You and your sister have done your best to throw mud on it and to set it alight, but I built it as I build everything, stone by stone. I will not have it crumble because a half-man cannot close his mouth. Jaime left without bowing. He left without anything. The corridor outside smelled of candle smoke and old decisions. Night was coming in clean over the bay. He told himself he would sleep and think. He did not sleep. Before the moon had dragged itself fully above the dark line of trees on the farther bank, there was a scratching at his door like a rat. Varys stood when he opened as if he had been telling a story to the shadow at his own feet and it had ended well. My lord, he whispered. If there were to be a guest leaving the castle tonight through some passage known long and well, now would be the hour for him to pack. I will do it, Jaime said, because he had been walking toward this moment since he had stopped the Kettleblack swords. He followed the eunuch through a warren of spaces where old mortar flaked when you brushed it and smells of damp and rat droppings rose up. The tunnels under the Red Keep were like veins under skin. You could run a blade through them and the whole place would bleed. He found Tyrion in the black, his small shape against the gray, his breath careful. Careful, Tyrion said. A word people like our sister have never learned. He smelled of stone and the stale wine of fear. So you've decided to be a brother after all. I should have been one earlier, Jaime said. His mouth felt odd around the truth. He reached and grasped Tyrion's shoulder, the shape of his bone. I can get you to the river. Varys can get me further, Tyrion said, too quickly. He peered up at Jaime as if he wanted to memorize his face and then decided against it. One thing first, he said. Tell me, the girl I wed, not Sansa. Long ago, he swallowed. Tell me the truth about her. You told me how it was, that she was bought. His laugh was a flake of rust. You told me I should never speak her name again. Tell me it was a lie. Tell me you lied for my good, or for his good. Someone's good. The tunnel suddenly felt as narrow as a throat. Jaime's tongue thickened. The air seemed to ask him a question he had not known was coming. He could feel the threads of 1,000 decisions like cobwebs on his face. He could cut them or he could be tangled. He took a breath that might as well have been his last. I lied, he said, and watched the world change in his brother's eyes. She was not a whore. She was what she seemed. A girl. We paid her after to tell you different. Father said. He left the rest unsaid. Tywin said was as good as God said in this place. Tyrion stood very still. In the silence, water dripped from somewhere far and fell into an echo that could have been a world away. The dwarf's expression did not change for a count of 10, of 20. Then it did, and what it became was a thing Jaime had no name for. Thank you, Tyrion said after a while, and the words contained no gratitude. That's a weight lifted. He stared at the wall as if it were his future. I suppose I could go to the wall and serve and marry a daughter of some fisher and be most excellent at everything I do, and everyone would nod and smile and say, what a good man. And in an hour of quiet I would put my head in a pot of water and wait. Tyrion, Jaime began. No, the small man raised his hand. Save it. I will find my own way out. He looked at Varys, and the eunuch lifted his eyebrows mildly. Thank you for the key, brother. It opens more than doors. Jaime wanted to say, I did what you asked. He wanted to say, I have arrested the queen. I am trying to build something here that is not a tower, yo. You can topple with 2 fingers. Instead he said nothing and gave Tyrion a kiss on his brow like they were boys, and he could still stretch his arm and reach the past. Tyrion flinched as if love were hot. Varys led him away, soft as a brush across dust. Jaime took a different corridor, a narrower one, because often choosing a narrower path made men feel better about themselves, as if tight walls made them honest. He had not slept when the castle shuddered with news. Servants ran as if something in their hatching had told them to run one day, and this was that day. Bells clanged in a miserable alarm. Someone struck a torch and dropped it, and an entire corner of the corridor flickered as the flame groped in the rushes and then died. A boy in Tyrell green blew on his fingers as if burned and laughed, appalled at his own glee. The hand was dead. He had been found on his chamber privy, skewered with a crossbow bolt. His face a pale astonishment that a man like him could be stopped by something as crude as a pointed stick. There was other talk that ran ahead of men like hounds. Of a woman in a bed she had once been forbidden and then invited to. Of a chain about her throat. Of a tongue swollen. Jaime stopped hearing it. He stood in the corridor while the news shouldered its way past him and thought of when he had been a squire and Tywin had gripped his shoulder just so. Exactly the pressure that meant pride without weakness. He thought of gold. Not of the metal but of the privilege of moving through the world as if doors opened without being touched. He thought of how he had made himself into a man who could be named for the worst thing he had done. He closed his eyes and saw a boy with strawberry tart on his mouth laughing. He went to Cersei. The guards let him in because he was white and because in this castle that counted for everything. She was sitting straight again by the fire as if she had a hinge in her spine that could never relax. Her hair had fallen loose. She had not noticed. Her eyes were bright as if she had been crying or as if her tears had dried in her. She looked up and for a moment a mother sat there whose son had died and now her father had. Then she blinked and it was Cersei again, all angles and decision. You've come to gloat, she said. Her voice was very calm. Or to tell me it was for the king's peace. Father is dead, Jaime said, and heard how ordinary a thing his voice made of it. Yes, she said. and there was an immense space inside that word. And our little monster, she meant Tyrion. You let him out of his cell, and he repaid you like a snake. She rose in one motion. The room smelled of smoke, skin, anger. You did this. You and your vows and your fair notions. You have always been too stupid to tie a knot as tight as father's. You cut with a clean blade and think you've done well because the blood does not spatter your cloak. Do not, Jaime said quietly, because the words sheave and cut would not sit on his tongue together. Not now. Now I say it, she said. She came toward him slow enough that it was worse than fast. You think you can hold me, that you can sit on your white tower and erase me like chalk from a slate. I will walk from this room and from this keep and from this prison you've made me, and I will sit with my son and tell him which hand is right and which is wrong. You will stand aside, and you will watch. No, Jaime said. He was surprised by how steady his voice sounded, how much it did not wobble. You will stay while we find the poisoner and while our city is quiet. You will see Tommen when I say so and not before. You will stand trial if the law says you must. She smiled. It was a terrible thing, stripped of wit. Trial? She repeated softly, as if tasting the word on a finger. Who will judge me? My dead father? My brother in white? She put a hand to his chest. He felt bones through silk. You swore to protect me, she said. You swore. I swore to protect my king, he said. And he saw Tommen's face then, the roundness of it, the softness. From his enemies. From you, if I must. From me. Her hand dropped away as if his chest had burned it. She stepped back, and he watched her build a new thing out of herself as he had seen smiths do with hot iron. Her mouth became a line. Her eyes went flat. You will regret, she said. Every choice you have made since you came back with your pretty trinket. You will regret breathing in this city when I breathe. I will make certain of it. Do as you like, he said, because what else was there, in truth? He turned, and in that moment the air between them felt like a bridge that had burned down while they were standing on it, and now both stared at the ashes and pretended not to be surprised. Kevin Lannister came within 2 days, thinner than he had been at harvest, eyes rimmed red, and accepted the hand's chain after he had refused it once in a different world when Cersei had offered it like poisoned wine. He did not thank Jaime for forcing the choice by removing the queen from the table like a piece. He did not curse him either. He sat in council and kept order with a hand that had never been praised for brilliance, but which could pick up spilled grain and put it back in a sack faster than anyone else. He signed the betrothal that Tywin had always meant to sign, Tommen to Marjorie, and he did it with the careful austerity of a man totaling the cost of a winter roof. If you wish peace, he said, tie it to those who grow wheat, not those who spill blood. He looked at Mace when he said it and not at Jaime. The wedding was quiet as a prayer and sad in a way that has no word. Tommen's hand trembled in Marjorie's, but if she felt it, she hid the feeling. She wore white and her grandmother a green that looked like the last bright leaf before frost. Loras stood behind them in white and kept his face like marble. Jaime kept his touches to the prince light as if he were moving a bowl of milk. And not a king. That night he slept in the White Sword Tower and dreamed of opening doors that were in fact painted walls. Qyburn came to him the next morning with hands too clean and a smile too bland. My lord, he said, we have the remains of Ser Gregor Clegane down in the cellar beneath the Tower of the Hand. I had thought to see whether anything in him could be coaxed to yield the truth of the poison that slew him. It is a curiosity, of course, but such curiosities can be useful. The truth is that Oberyn Martell killed him, Jaime said. We saw it and we saw the price. Qyburn, Pycelle is your superior. You will petition him if you wish to cut into corpses. He saw a flicker of annoyance in the subtle muscles near Qyburn's eyes. Grand Maester Pycelle is old and squeamish, Qyburn said mildly. He does not approve of new knowledge. Then Durden in the kitchens shall examine Gregor, Jaime said dryly. I've seen him take apart a boar fast enough. He shook his head. No, the man is dead. Bury him, or better, burn him. Give Dorne a clean head in a jar if they insist. I've no wish to see what games are played with a monster after death. Qyburn bowed, smiling his bland smile, but the smile had thinner edges now. As you wish. Lancel knelt before the High Septon in the Great September and told a truth that shook the air like thunder no one had been expecting in that season. The old man's voice was gentle when he sent him away. The doorkeepers' faces looked as if they had swallowed lemons. Word found the corners of the castle without hands. Servants took it down their sleeves to markets. Markets sent it into alleys where it grew extra arms and legs. Jaime felt the rumor push against him like heat as he walked the halls. He put a dozen men between Cersei and any door that mattered. He let Septa Moel in with her lectionary and a small vial of sweet seeds to help sleep. He turned away Qyburn's petition again and goaded Pycelle into doing his work for once in his long life. He watched Tommen begin to sit a chair that was too high for his feet. He taught the boy to hold a sword. He did not tell him that a sword should sometimes be used to knock foolishness from a man's hands rather than split him, because he did not know that himself until too late. The city did not starve. Gold cloaks did not beat widows to see if something interesting would spill out. Marjorie smiled, and sometimes she looked tired in a way that meant she went to her room and put her head in her hands and did not want anyone to see. Olenna wrote letters with a speed that implied she had 3 hands tucked beneath her shawl. Kevin balanced coin. Varys vanished in a puff of rumor and was seen nowhere and everywhere. And that meant he had retreated to whatever corner he had prepared for precisely this day. In Dorne, a prince mourned a brother and did not send war because sometimes a man can hold a knife in his heart a long time without drawing it across a throat. A bird arrived painted in polite words and promises. The skull that was not Gregor's was accepted with the grim humor that comes when men are too tired to do anything but take what they can. The 7 kingdoms held their breath. Cersei's trial did not move fast. It was a beast that needed to be fed bits of paper on a schedule and would slow if you attempted to feed it a manhole. She paced in her chambers and wore a groove in the carpet that a carpenter had to lift and replace with new weave because she'd made the old one ugly. She wrote letters and sent them to men who had loved her from afar with the faith with which men love torches from boats out on dark water. Some did not reply, being wiser than they wished to be. One of them replied and lost his post the next day and wondered if it had been worth it for the way her words had warmed his cold nights and burned his fingers. Jaime went to her before the hearing where she would be told the charges in a room that smelt of parchment and soap. He did not go to taunt. He did not know why he went. He stood in the doorway and looked at her hands. She had pressed her nails into her palms so long they had left little half-moons. She looked back at him without expression. "Lord Commander," she said, as if spitting out a pit. He lifted a hand in which he had felt nothing for months. "Cersei," he said, "tell me you will meet them head-on, without tricks. Tell me you will not tear the city down because you are afraid." "I am never afraid," she said. "You are always afraid," he answered, and for the first time she looked away. He felt the tiniest triumph, and it sickened him. "I will stand where I must," he said. "Do the same. You would relish seeing me in a penance shift," she said. "You would love to watch me walk barefoot while fishwives spit." "I would prefer that to seeing you hang," Jaime said, and at that she smiled without joy, and for a heartbeat the girl with grass in her hair ran with him between rows of vines back at Casterly Rock. Dare after dare, laughter like flung coins. Tyrion's ghost lived in shadows where he had never walked. Jaime felt it when he crossed the Tower of the Hand, which was never the same tower twice in one lifetime. He felt it when he spoke with Kevin and when he untied Tommen's clumsy knots on a toy's reins. He felt it most when he turned a page in the White Book and considered where he would place the next line. The day he stopped a city from tearing itself, the day he saved a boy from the world, or the day he lost the only family he had loved without condition. Sometimes at night, he went down to the yard alone and practiced with his left hand. The sword felt foreign in it, a language he had learned as a man and not a boy. He moved under the torches and imagined old Ser Arthur's eyes on him, imagined the disappointment and imagined. Dared he? Approval. He cut air, and the air did not mind. When spring's breath found the city at last and sly flowers showed themselves in tea. He cracks of old stone. The High Septon fell sick and the men in the corridors smelled opportunity like meat. A lean fellow from the Riverlands preached in the squares of hunger and injustice. He drew eyes like bread draws birds. Jaime watched him once from a window and thought of Lancel's cord, thought of Cersei's enemies swelling like a tide if you gave them the moon to stare at. He returned to the White Sword Tower that evening and sharpened nothing. Cersei stood in a small hall with a handful of septons and judges and spoke against charges carefully laid. Adultery, conspiracy to defraud the king's peace. The pious little list had a strange neatness to it, as if sin could be rolled and placed in a drawer. She did not plead for pity. She challenged. "Name the men," she said dryly. Half the room swallowed. None said Jaime Lannister because none dared. She dared with her eyes and he watched. She did not ask for trial by battle. Not yet. She understood when to play a particular card. She always had. Qyburn introduced odd testimony about bones and powders. Pycelle blustered and boomed and forgot his place and remembered it again when the old woman in green coughed exactly twice. And then one morning a raven came black and heavy from the north with a set of words that felt almost like a jest scrubbed clean of humor. Stannis Baratheon had driven north and now held a part of Winterfell in siege. The north remembered. It went on remembering. What happens in the south was a story told by men who had not seen snow that wedged a door shut with its shoulder. Jaime folded the parchment slowly. The world had a way of making men in castles remember that their castles were not the world. He went to Tommen in the practice yard. The boy's sword was real, and he tried to hold it as a man, 2 hands, thumb straight. His breath steamed faintly in the lingering chill. Marjorie watched without interfering. When Tommen looked up and saw Jaime, some of the tension in his knuckles eased. He nearly smiled. "Did I keep my shoulders square?" he asked. He wanted praise so badly it hurt to see. "You kept your courage square," Jaime said. "The rest will follow." He corrected a stance with his palm. He felt the future's breath on the boy and wondered what boyhood he was taking away with every sensible order he gave. "Your Grace," he said, because at least one of them ought to say it out loud occasionally, so it was not only a word on a seal. He would arrest his sister every day of his life if it meant this. This square of sky, this boy's breath, this city quiet enough to hear water. He would do it again and again and again. That night he opened the white book again and traced his own name. He believed in law in some pained, late way he would not have recognized when he was 17. He believed in it the way a man believes in a small fire when the dark is very big. He wrote what had been done. How the king had been taken to arms and crowned in a crown that did not bruise his head. How the queen had been confined and then brought to answer with words, not knives. How the hand had died. How a prince of Dorne had fought a legend and broken it and been broken. He left a space. He had learned to leave spaces for things the world would write in for him without asking. When he closed the book, he felt the weight of it as if he had put a stone on a grave. He set out the candles and pinched their wicks one by one until night was all that remained. In the dark there was his golden hand, faintly luminous as if the moon had been caught in it. He curled it and uncurled it, a living thing imprisoned in a dead shape, and laughed once softly at himself. The sound did not entirely break the quiet. When he slept, he dreamed he was standing again in the hall with boar and spice, and Joffrey looked at him and laughed with cake on his mouth. And then a bell began to ring and did not stop. He woke with his mouth full of the taste of iron. He rinsed it away in clear water and found that day had come again. And again there were hours to put in their boxes and people to usher and a woman to keep behind doors because he loved the realm more than he loved what she made of him. In time, the city would call those days peaceful. They would mean only that no one set the city afire. They would forget the weighings and the silent deciding. They would remember a boy with a cat, a queen with a certain tilt of her chin, a man in white with a hand that caught the light. They would not remember what it cost. The White Book would. The White Book remembered everything and judged nothing. Jaime thought that was what law was meant to be. Once, in the wan light before dawn, he turned his face toward Maegor's holdfast and listened. The city breathed through a million mouths. The sea rolled a shoulder. The torches on the walls made a thread of changing glow like slow embroidery. He imagined Cersei standing at her window in green shadow looking toward the same sliver of sky and thinking how she would reclaim it. He did not love her less because he had bound her. He had only learned the size of what love could not do. It could not make wrong right, and it could not change a woman into a mother who would choose the child over the crown. It could not unmake a father into a man who would spare a son. Love did not even close doors once they had been opened. He turned away and went to wake Tommen, to put a blade in his hand, to point at a world and say, "This is yours and also it is not." He took up the day as a man takes up a load. He thought of truth as a cold river you must cross whether you like it or not, and he stepped into it and let it take the heat from his legs. And somewhere to the east a small man on a ship cursed a brother and then quieted and began to build himself again, piece by bitter piece. Somewhere in the west, a girl seeped into a new name. Somewhere north, a hard man in black walked a wall of ice and wondered which name to speak out. Ood to the snow. But here the law such as it was held. Years would not make this easier. They would only make it the thing that had happened already, and therefore something a man could put his hand around. Jaime waited for morning to be fully born and for bells to carry news that would be ordinary for once. Wheat from the reach, a fishmonger's son whipped for cheating scales, a singer made to stand in the square for mocking a lordling. He waited and wondered whether he was a better man than the one whose name had been written down in red whispers all his life and whether that mattered. He set another line in his head as if for the book, held when he could have yielded, loved when he should have fled, chose the boy. The light grew, the city woke, the bells began, ordinary, and for a moment Jaime allowed himself to hear them not as alarms, not as threats, but as what they had been once, long ago before kings polished them with their deaths. Metal struck to bring men to one place and ask them to move in some harmony. He closed his eyes and let the sound ring through him until his heart found the rhythm. Then he went about his work.